The primal screamers, Wilhelm Reich kind of things. And so I wanted to bring the idea of psychiatry into a horror movie. And if you were a 20th century werewolf, what would you do to try to cope with your surroundings? So this is a movie that you'll see if you watch old movies. There's a lot of wonderful old character actors in it who have been in many horror movies in many cases. John Carradine is in it. Patrick McNee, who was in the TV series The Avengers. You'll see Slim Pickens in it. Dee Wallace, who was kind of E.T.'s mother. And a lot of other people who you recognize their faces, and you can pick out their names later on. I'll be back for a little Q&A on the end of it. And this movie kind of also, it's a landmark in the special effects. So one thing that you'll see is the special effects are done by a guy named Rob Bottin, who he was kind of an heir to Dick Smith, who was the kind of father of great American makeup after Lon Chaney, horror makeup after Lon Chaney Sr. And this new kind of, this before morphing and, kind of video effects had hit. So it all had to be done mechanically. And they liked what he did so much that every time that somebody turns into a werewolf, they kind of back it up and he turns into a werewolf from another angle. So you'll see quite a bit of the special effects. Anyway, I hope you like it. And I'll be back later and we'll do a Q&A.
So John, tell me, what brings you to Taos today?
Well, various things. We started yesterday down at the Rancho Los Luceros. The day before, we met some of the people who were going to not even a conference, but really just kind of the kickoff, for that facility. I came a couple days ago, kind of through the auspices of Kathleen Broyles and the New Mexico Film Commission. To come down and do a couple things. And the first one was we did a little talk about storytelling in Santa Fe at the old Masonic Lodge there. Right. And the two movies that we're showing while we're down here, one is The Secret of Roan Inish and one is The Howling. And I kind of picked those two movies because they're such different movies in some ways, but they're very alike in others. They're both about the shape-changing myth. One is a woman who turns into a seal and back into a woman and back into a seal, and this is a werewolf movie. But also because they're very different in that one is, in the case of Secret of Roan Inish, very much of the oral tradition. There are stories told within it, sometimes really just a person telling a story, but it's set on an island where the little 10-year-old girl who's the protagonist has never seen a movie or TV. So even when she's imagining these stories, they're very low tech. She's not somebody with a lot of TV images or whatever to fall back on. Whereas The Howling is very much of a media tradition. And a lot of what we talked about when we were planning it is, okay, what are the rules for werewolves? Do we go to the old legends, or we just go to the MGM version with Maria Ouspenskaya and Lon Chaney Jr.,
Right.
And let's bring the media into it. And that one of the things that happens with our kind of media age is that as amazing and shocking as anything is when it first hits you, it's trivialized by TV. So at the end of the movie, in The Howling, people are seeing somebody really turn into a werewolf on TV, and it's like, okay, what's next? That was cool. So I thought they would be an interesting match for the people who saw both of them, or to think about storytelling.
Right.
And then the next day we went out to Rancho Los Luceros, where it's unclear exactly what it's going to be, but one part of it's going to be about film. And I think the nice thing that you've got going here in New Mexico is that because of what the government has done, it's become a very popular place for Hollywood movies and some foreign movies to come and shoot. You're starting to build up a really good kind of crew base here of people who know what they're doing on a crew. So it's an employer of New Mexicans. But then there's the other thing, which is the more kind of cultural part of film. There's also a lot of initiatives to get people from New Mexico, from the various communities in New Mexico, to make their own movies. And part of that is to explain their own lives, you know, and it's one of the things that movies can do, and it's one of the reasons that we were talking about the oral tradition of how can you use film to continue that tradition and hold on to some of the things that might get lost in those communities as the young people become more media people than, you know, people who just remember what they've been told.
According to Governor Richardson's announcement, this whatever it is going to be at Los Luceros holds a lot of potential for Native American and Hispanic filmmakers.
Yeah, I think it's going to be open to everybody, but I think the great thing about it is where it's located, for one thing, but also that it can be kind of a center for, this is the West, and people don't necessarily live close to each other. You know, and so if you're in an isolated community here, but you've got some stories, and it's going to, I think, be a place for people to meet. In fact, yesterday, what was very interesting is I thought, oh, it's New Mexico, all the film people in the state are going to know each other. Half the people said, oh, I've heard of you.
You're right.
You know, or haven't even heard of you, you know, and so there was really, with only about 20 people there, a lot of networking going on. Oh, that sounds really cool, you know.
Right.
So I think that out of that is going to develop not only people exchanging ideas, but probably a center for people to show their movies and then maybe take them on the road around the state. And there will be other things that have nothing to do with movies there. There's a great ecological opportunity there because of the nature of the place. Incredible history of that place as far as New Mexico history, you know. And I'm sure that there'll be art and dance and other things. But I think for movies, one of the things I think they're planning on doing is some training. And I was just saying, you know, in the kind of hacienda style, there's a lot of little buildings. You can have a major program going there, but there'll always be a building or two that are free to learn how to light and shoot a scene in an interior. And then you've got the Rio Grande and all this beautiful stuff to shoot outside. So it seems like a really nice campus, if you want to think it that way, for that kind of training and that kind of meeting.
Well, you've been to Taos a
couple times, yeah.
Right. You were here for the Taos Talking Picture Film Festival. And I know that Governor Richardson has been kind of trying to grease the wheels a little bit to try to get a film festival restarted here in Taos.
You know, almost every film festival in the world, not just in the United States, is having to rethink itself just because of what's happening with the economy. So I think this is a great place. You've got a good audience here, you know, an audience who are kind of interested in what's going on in the bigger world, but also what's going on just in this state. So I think there's a real opportunity. It's just that, you know, it's a hard thing to do, and you have to be very realistic about it's an expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
You know,
you have to find your niche.
And be ambitious enough that it stands out in the year of, oh great, it's festival time, but not so ambitious that every year you have to say, well, we know we went deep into debt last year, let's go deeper into debt this year. You know, it's expensive to fly people here and that kind of thing. So I think it's film festivals evolve, and I've seen in a couple places, Miami is one that comes to mind, film festivals get to a certain point and then die and then have a rebirth that's more appropriate to what's going on in that place at that time. So yeah, I hope that can happen here, because it certainly is a great place to have a festival.